the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur, amongst other things, is no one gets you. But you can't explain the drive.
Meet David, came into the UK to study from Zimbabwe to create a better life for himself, driven by the high aspirations his parents had for him, building his career, making good money, meeting his wife, starting a family, and pursuing his dream of a great business, but at what cost? Hear David's story. My name's Richard Osborne, and this is Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF. David, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, it was a pleasure. We met at one of our UKBF events in Northampton. Yes. And I think it was like if it wasn't your first, it was one of the earliest sort of networking events you'd ever been to.
In Northampton.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I remember you sort of coming in, and you was a little bit sort of uncertain, but you got speaking with sort of some of the other guests, people who are attending and networking there. Yes. And I remember you sharing part of your story. And listening to you talk, I thought this is really inspiring and interesting. Okay, and I thought it'd be great to have you on the show, on the Drive podcast, and share your story with us.
Yes, thank you very much. It was very interesting because, as you know, in the entrepreneurial journey, you are most of the times you're on your own, especially when you're a startup and in the early days of it. And it's good to find a sort of kinship group. You find a group of people who've got the same battle scars, as it were. Yes. People have been through the same, traversed the same sort of journey, and so I quite liked it. I haven't done more, and I wish I could do a bit more. And I'm glad that we stayed in touch, and you've got me here today, and to tell my part of the story. It's an ongoing story. It's not. I'm not in the millions yet. I'm working on it, but definitely it was interesting to meet you and to hear your story as well.
Yeah, well, the part that I found interesting really was, and really what the podcast is about, is when people who you say, not into the millions yet, but that's not the important part to me personally, yes, or to what UKBF is about, what UKBF represents, and generally what 99% of all business owners, self-employed people in the UK, they are making a living and finding their field and building their small business.
Yes.
And that was great from yourself. So what I'd like to do is start to sort of build that picture up of your journey that took you to where you are today, and some of the obstacles you've overcome, challenges you faced, and then sort of even to some of the knocks that, as you've started your own business, that you've hit upon. So if we go right back to the beginning, so you was born in Zambia but raised in Zimbabwe.
Yes, I was born in the colonial times, and at the age of 3, Zimbabwe gained its independence, 1980. So my parents then, with everyone else, they migrated on a train across the Zambezi, if you know that river, if you know the Victoria Falls. So the train actually cuts across Victoria Falls into Zimbabwe. That's the sort of drama of the journey. And and then I was raised in Zim, a brand new country at that point, to my father was a lawyer who studied in Russia, my mom a school teacher. And I was raised in a conservative sort of family, with fairly strong Christian values, if you want to call it that, or religious values. And along the way, I sort of had a lot of sort of interest in sort of each time you gave me a toy as a kid, my parents would say I would take it apart and then try to put it back together. I always had this sort of curious mind. And one of my dad's friends, fairly early on, he said, this boy is going to be an engineer. Yeah. It never happened, but somewhere along the way, so as I grew older, it sort of started to join up, with that sort of, if you want to call it prophecy, as it were, back in the 80s. So I went to school like any other child, and I was very good in most of the stuff I did at school. I was very good, and so I did what used to be known as O levels, and I did my GCSEs and A levels. I passed all of that, but most of what I was actually sent to a school that was more centered on academics. And my mom discouraged me as much as possible as a young person to stop drawing, to stop putting things apart. So I was supposed to be as it were, I was an A student. So the expectation was that I'm going to be, in the academics kind of thing.
Yeah, I picked that up,
Yeah.
that where your parents, you say, a teacher and a lawyer,
Yes.
they are both very academic roles.
They themselves, yes.
And you mentioned that previously, talking that your parents raised you to be very stoic and a very sort of hard work ethic.
Yes.
So they clearly, your parents had very high aspirations for you.
They did, and they sort of saw investing in me as a child who had a lot of potential to do a lot of big things. And so when I went to A level, I sort of secondary school altogether really, I sort of dropped all of the other things that were non-academic. So I was quite sporty. I used to play basketball. I used to run. I never really played football. I was skinny enough to sort of do a bit of rugby, but I never actually did. The school concentrated on academics. So that was the idea, that, you do your books, you pass, and then you do something big like become a lawyer as well. Mm-hmm. Such that when I migrated to the UK, which was sort of when I was about 21, and I came here on my own, I had no family here. I was just a 21-year-old looking for, at that point, there was something of an opening. The UK was advertising in the what they call the British councils all over the world. They've got these places called the British Council, which sort of advertises the UK life to people who they're encouraging to migrate. Okay. So a lot of the migration that was happening in 1999, that sort of time, 97, 98, especially from Zim, was encouraged by the British Council to say, apply these jobs in England, there's nursing, there's anything, or just come and learn and then you can develop yourself. So I took that opportunity. Yeah. I convinced my parents that, let me go to let me go to UK, make a life for myself. And that's something that took them a long time to see the point of doing it. They thought, be here and become a lawyer, do something here in Zim. You don't need to go to the UK. But I had my own sort of internal drive, as this podcast is called, And in fact, to take you back a little bit, during that time, even though I was expected to be an academic sort of child, there was a time when my dad had done some deals with some of his colleagues, and they'd a lot of what were known crocodile skins in the house, left over from this deal that had sort of gone bad. And so these crocodile skins were just stuff lying around in our house in boxes that just... As
in literal crocodile skins?
Yes. So I can sort of give you a bit of context. So in Zimbabwe, there's a lot of wildlife. Yeah. And there's a lot of people who make things out of wildlife, skin, hide, and stuff like that. So you've got elephant shoes, you've got ostrich belts and ostrich handbags. But this is back then. I don't think it's that easy to sort of play around with things like that anymore. And then there's an industry that sort of keeps crocodiles. Okay. But they keep the young ones for slaughter, for meat at restaurants where people eat crocodile meat. And then the skin, the tender skin, which is still thin, it hasn't got the big chunky scales. The scales are much smaller. Yeah. That's used to make garments or to make belts. Okay. So this stuff was in our house. All legal, nothing illegal, nothing sort of shady. That's just what was what my dad had been into at that time.
So whilst he was teaching, was he still teaching?
No, he was. At this point, he's working in the government. He's a civil servant within the Ministry of Justice. Yeah. So, that was him. The teacher was Mum. Right. So he had done this deal because he could speak Russian. So he had met some Russians and they'd done these deals, and it never really went anywhere. But there was all this leftover material. Yeah. And so it had been in our house for a good 5-6 years and nothing had happened. It's just boxes piled in one of the spare rooms. And so I said to my dad, why don't I take these things and make something of them? And I'm 16 years old at this time. Yeah. 16, 17, I think. And so from my own thought processes, I started researching about these crocodile skin belts and crocodile skin products. And then I took these skins and I had the guy cut them into belts. And then that was my first sort of foray into the game of entrepreneurship at this point. Because then I took these belts and I started selling them at the flea markets and in some of the shops. So imagine at that point that your normal belt that you just wear, a leather belt, would probably cost about $10 at that time, because our money was a bit closer to the US dollar. Yeah. And these crocodile skin belts were $150. So that was
the normal retail.
That's the actual retail price. Yeah. And I was selling them at a flea market for $100. So at this point, I got this thing in me that I could actually. Good money. It was quite good money, and all of it wasn't my money. I was just giving it back to my dad. No. he kind of encouraged it a little bit, but he still thought, I don't want you to be a market seller. I really want you to wear a suit and work in an office.
That's interesting then that I see that. So from your perspective, at that point, you felt motivated, and you did, to take all this stock that was sat there and start to generate some income, which you was paying back to your father.
Yeah.
Because presumably he had spent a load of money on them and wasn't getting that money back.
It was kind of almost like waste. Like it wasn't. It's just leftover from a deal that really didn't yield any money for him.
So it's all done and dusted.
So it's all done and dusted. Say you were selling books at some point, and they're not selling that much. You've just got them piled up in your house.
And from his perspective, he saw you going down flea market, sort of market trader route. I'm guessing couldn't see anything beyond that, and wanted to rein you back in to follow in his footsteps as a lawyer or something along those sort of lines.
So, but to me, when I look back, this was sort of the real seeds of sort of entrepreneurship within me. This idea of seeing things that at the point they just look like waste, and then turning them into products, and then turning that into money. So at some point I ran out of those things, and then I gave all of the money to my dad. So I'd no bank account to sit on to say, I made all this money. I remember buying myself a pair of Timberland boots or something like that. That's all I remember doing. But I just remember the buzz and the feeling of creating something out of nothing, out of my own sheer effort kind of thing. So, and then when I came here, I found myself, I started to study law. But it became...
How did that feel? Sorry, when because I can't imagine, you obviously saw the promotional, the sales message, come to the UK, great opportunities, whatever the message may be at that time, to actually uphill and make that move to a completely foreign country that you've just seen the sales brochure, like going on a holiday. So you see the holiday brochures, and they paint all the sort of perfect picture of the great bars, the great food and drink. What was it really like when you step off that plane, boat, when you arrive in the UK, your first few months in UK,
in Blighty.
What in Blighty? I presume London. Then you.
Yeah, it was the first place I stayed in was Luton Town.
Luton. I was born in Luton.
Oh yeah.
What was your first few months like in Luton?
So it wasn't particularly easy, but you see, you've got to remember, the thing that drove me was this belief that I'll be successful. So everything that was in front of me was just kind of something that I'm just going to wave out of my way, and I'm going to create a path. That's always been kind of my makeup kind of thing. So I don't always sort of acknowledge the, if you like, the obstacles or the things like what you mentioned before, that I was raised to be stoic and to be focused. And that's the thing I always had about me. So there was a lot of things that were very difficult in the beginning. You remember I step off the plane, I'm wearing a suit, and I'm wearing shoes, just normal leather shoes, and socks, thin socks. And I don't have a coat, and it's on the 7th. It's a
lot colder.
It was a lot colder. It was in March when I came, and I've got a jumper, but I put on that jumper underneath my suit jacket, and I'm still freezing. This place is really weird. And then I went over to a friend of mine, and he put me up, and he shows me around, and then I buy my first coat, my first puffer jacket out of the Luton market. The Luton market at the back of the Arndale. It used to be called the Arndale back in the day. And I'm sort of looking around. What am I going to do? But I had a lot more excitement than I had fear.
And you just mentioned there a friend. So you had a friend already here to welcome you. So that probably made the landing softer.
It made the landing softer. It meant I had somewhere to go. I mean, I'd made these arrangements beforehand. There was actually a bit of something a bit weird happened. The family that was friends with my dad, who were supposed to look after me when I came, something happened, and I couldn't sort of stay with them. So I had to sort of start creating my own path at this point. Everything that had been the plan had fallen apart right at the airport kind of thing. Right. And this is 1999, so I look back at it like, it was character building stuff, as they call it. It was terrifying a little bit. But I remember speaking to my dad on the phone. He's like, my son, you're there. Just make your plan. Stick to your plan and work your plan. Things will come together. And I had enough money to sort of look after myself for some time. And then my friend says, I'm only in student accommodation. I can't really keep you. You can't really stay with me for too long. So I went across to other friends in Leeds.
Yeah.
So I ended up in Leeds. And
I went across. I thought you was going to say like across the road there. You
no.
Went way up the M1.
What was that? 4 hours drive, up the M1 on the National Express.
So you wasn't. So when you went to university, you came over to the UK and
yes.
you studied for a couple of years. Is that right?
Yes. So when
it wasn't Luton University.
It wasn't Luton University. So I kind of moved around quite a bit, trying to find my feet, as it were, at that time. So I ended up in Leeds, and at Leeds I didn't actually stay with friends. I had my money that I had. They helped me to find my own place to stay. So, and then I started looking for my own way, and I'm following all of the protocols. You follow what the rules are. The immigration says you should do this, you should do that. So I ended up applying for school, and then I got a place in school. But that place was actually down in London. Right. So I stay in Leeds for a little bit. I get my place to go to university. I ended up in Bexley Heath doing an access course. They said you've got to do this access course, access to law, and then you go and study law at University of North London. I think it's called Metropolitan now or something like that. Okay. It used to be London Polytechnic, maybe back in the days in the 1980s.
So what was the time frame from here, from when you got off the plane
yes
to when you found yourself starting university in London? How long was you moving around for?
So I came in March 1999.
Yeah.
So September I was already doing college. I'd already managed to set myself up such that I was doing.
So it was sort of March to September.
Yeah, I was back in London of the same year.
Yeah.
And then I'm living in a place called Woolwich, and then I'm commuting into London, into University of North London, and we still had funding at that point.
Yeah.
So this was it all happened in about a year and a half, 2 years. So we still had funding. So they were funding. So there was a charity that was involved in Zimbabwe that was funding our education kind of thing. Something happened with that, and I think there was a lot more of these other political stories coming out of Zimbabwe at that time, to do with land grabs and so on and so forth. So somewhere along the way, there was a bit of a negative sentiment around us. So the funding that we had for university was pulled out of us, pulled away from us. So we couldn't sort of carry on. So we had to sort of start to negotiate our way around. So I ended up getting a job.
Yeah.
And in this job, I ended up working as a salesperson.
Okay.
And I'm in sales, and I don't know, my natural talents, as it were, they started to shine. I started to do very, very well for myself. Okay. And at this point, we're only doing, the job was, call it debt collection or credit management. Yeah. And so we're giving money we're being paid to collect from sort of aged debts, people who couldn't pay their debts, people who'd sort of written off their own debts, like they're not going to pay it. And then you'd negotiate with this person to pay back, we're talking 5, 10, 20,000 pounds. Someone who's really, the idea was to make someone believe that they can actually get out of debt with your conversation and make them pay back their debt.
Okay.
Which was, it's a fairly tall sort of order on someone to negotiate that sort of deal. And not many people could do it, but I found I could really do it. I was very successful in that job. So I'm learning at this time, I'm learning a lot of things. I'm learning spreadsheets, I'm learning also money.
That's quite a difficult negotiation.
It is a very difficult negotiation.
Because if you've got somebody who, and are these individuals or businesses? I'm assuming individuals.
Yes.
So you've got individuals who are thousands of pounds in debt.
Yes.
And that's quite a dark place to be.
Yes.
And then you've got somebody phoning up who want, on behalf of the company wanting that money back, whether it's a credit card, loan, car.
That's exactly what it was. Yes.
And you have to discuss with this person repayment terms and to get that money back.
Yes.
That's a difficult negotiation.
It is a very difficult negotiation. So we weren't trained. I definitely value a lot of the training that I got from that job, because we were trained to develop relationships.
Yeah.
We weren't trained to be debt collectors, to be door knockers, to scare people. The idea was to develop a relationship with the person you're speaking to, understand their circumstances, make it a consultative conversation kind of thing. Don't expect to make a call today and take payment from them today. Keep talking to them, keep talking. Then understand their whole picture, their global picture of what's their life like. So the guy who trained us was an American guy who worked for Capital One or all these other big companies. And so his way of thinking was, everyone to some extent has got some sort of assets or things that they could liquidate to get themselves out of a situation. So you'd have a conversation with someone who lives in a 4-bedroomed house and they're owing sort of 40,000 pounds and they might lose that house. And you say to them, how about you sell that house and downgrade and get a 2-bedroom house since your children are older. Those kind of conversations. Yeah. So they were very creative conversations. And so you'd speak to someone and they would actually hear what you're saying and they would end up sort of readjusting their lifestyle and end up getting out of debt. Yeah. So at the end of it, you would actually get cards and Christmas presents from the people that were collecting debts from, So this to me was a training ground for sort of negotiation, creative thinking, creative negotiation. And there was also, this is the first time I was actually learning spreadsheets, just how to manage things. And so you'd actually almost have a conversation where you're helping someone to manage their life.
I just want to roll back partly just to make sure, just to understand your journey from into that job and the education as well, to pick up on where the transition was, because you just mentioned a moment ago the funding ended.
Yes.
And so I'm drawing a picture in my mind that your future of your developing your legal qualification, you're studying, is coming under threat, and then you're taking a job which you learn a lot from, but was you able to finish your studies, or did you have to make a life choice?
Yes.
To because you had no choice.
Yeah, so I had no choice, because at the same time, so it was quite a volatile time at the same time, because I just didn't know where my life was going to go. What am I going to do? And I had to think on my feet. And then the journey now to actually finishing the law degree on sort of 12 grand a year now, I wasn't going to sort of be able to make £12,000 a year and have enough time to do university. The journey just wouldn't make sense. And when we spoke to the career people, they'll say, for you to actually become a lawyer, you could finish your degree, but you still need to do law school. You're sort of, from where you are right now, you're about 7 years away from finishing your law degree. And my old man was not feeling well back home, and there was a lot of upheaval. Yeah. So I thought, what, and having sort of been to court and seen a lot of the other sort of law in action, as it were, I wasn't that enthused by it, to be honest with you. My mind sort of doesn't function like that. Like, just get a job, stay in that corner, and just read legal papers and do. I couldn't find excitement in the prospect of actually becoming a lawyer at some point, just having seen what it actually entails.
How did your parents back home feel about that happening and you choosing not to follow that career? And
they didn't like it, and I think almost to this day, my father is gone now. He died some years ago now. My mom still talks about it.
Yeah.
That's I explained to her. I made a choice, and I've got no regrets about the choice I made, and I've not sort of gone on sort of just lazy around, do nothing. I've gone on to do a lot of other things that I found very interesting, and for me, it's always been about the curiosity of life. It's always been about learning new things and doing new skills. And I've never been someone who's got a destination mentality that I just want to do this and stop. I've got a lot of things that I've got a lot of interest in, and which is kind of leads me to where I am now in a journey. None of it is actually linear. It doesn't actually make sense, but so I have no regrets about that. Even early on, after I made the choice, and I was kind of raised like that anyway, that once you embark on something, once something is your journey, stick to it and make the most of it. Yeah. And that's how I'm made. So I'm not someone who looks back a lot and regrets a lot and replays things that what if, because I don't think anyone ever benefits from that. I think if you've got a focus, if you've got a direction, if you've got to change your focus and direction, let that be that.
It's it's funny, I was having a conversation with my daughter this weekend gone, because she runs her own business and she's had a bit of a challenge, and my advice to her was make a decision.
Yes.
And the decision you make will be the best decision you can make based on the information you have available at that time. So make a decision, commit to it. you don't know what the future is going to be.
Yes.
And if hindsight teaches you in the future that actually you should have made a different decision, that doesn't matter, because you made the right decision or with the information you had at that time.
Yes.
Don't look back with any regret. Everything's a learning curve.
Yeah, and that's always been how I've always sort of functioned. So as soon as I realized, that this journey is not going to take me anywhere, this whole sort of trying to go back to university is not going to, I started to develop myself more in this direction, where I ended up working in sales. And then after that job, I ended up working in for a bank, one of the older banks. And part of the things that we used to sell was that famous payment protection insurance.
Oh, them good old days.
Good old days. So my job was to give loans. I was a loans officer. I was earning less than what I was earning at the old job, but I was in the bank now, and I thought there was more prospect. And still, it still stayed within that vein of doing deals and talking to people and communicating, negotiating, and so the people that would come in, they are coming in for loans because they've been approved online, and so they're coming in to negotiate terms. And so a lot of that also involved looking at their financial circumstances. So I'm sort of building a picture based on information I've got in front of me. Yeah. Your credit file and your bank statement and your intentions with that money, that kind of thing. And so I did very well there, and so I was sort of earning around 300% of my target, 3 times what I was expected to do. So I kept on sort of developing a lot of these skills, in the world of sales and in the world of negotiation and so on and so forth. And then I got into mortgages.
Okay.
But the timing for mortgages was just completely, utterly off.
I'm just trying to think. So when was this? Because we obviously had the credit crunch and the collapse of mortgages. So was it before or after that time?
So I worked at the bank from 2003 to 2007.
All right, so 2007 was when the economy collapsed with all the...
Well, it collapsed in 2008.
No.
So I actually joined the train, as it were, because everyone I knew was selling houses, buying houses, selling houses, and some people were turning themselves into developers. I knew a couple of people who bought Bentleys. So I thought, you know what, I've got to get on this gravy train. There's something happening here, and at that very same time, that's when my ex-wife was pregnant with our first child.
Yeah. So your personal life had obviously, I was going to ask how your personal life was developing. So during that window of time, 2000 to 2007, you mentioned why. So obviously you got married and had children on the way.
Yeah. So I settled down with a girl I had known for some time, and we'd been friends. We dated and then broken up, and then we decided to get married. Eventually, we'd known each other for a good 7 years by the time we got married, and so at the point that our baby is being born, that's when I'm now in the game of mortgages, and we moved to Northampton because we had a flat in Mitcham, and we just thought, we want to raise our child away from, the stereotypical issues in London. We just want to have our child be raised in Northampton, and
lovely place.
Lovely place. I love Northampton, and we got here, and then I did a lot of pipeline mortgage business that I was looking at. I'm going to make a couple of $100,000 out of this by the end of the year, because there was a lot of money to be made at that time. And just as I'm actually I had a couple of deals complete, smaller amounts. I had bigger deals now coming. So I'm at the hospital, my baby's just been born, and then I get a phone call from the developer, and I've been seeing what was in the news. Yeah. And so my baby's just over there, with the mom, and I'm sort of in a private room next door, and I'm being told, we can't do those houses anymore. I had 4 houses about to complete, and each one of those had approximately, at that time, there were good deals to be had. There was about sort of 18 grand of commission on each of those sales. And then I'm told, the banks are no longer lending. They completely stopped. I mean, they didn't sort of slow down the lending. They just cut off the tap. They just shut off the tap. No more money.
Like not mortgages, but at the time I was building a product called e-filing, which was needing a lot of funding for it. And part of that funding was the company overdraft.
Yes.
And using some personal finance I'd built from selling a previous business. So all of that was going into this. And I got an email from my bank telling me they were going to withdraw the overdraft.
And they wanted all their money back.
Wanted all their money back. And I was like, that's going to sink my business.
Yeah.
And they've just told me by email
Yeah.
they're going to sink my business. So I was in that environment at that time where things around 2008, 2009 were going to happen. And the irony was that was one of the customers that was lined up to use this product we were building and had said, we're working with you on it, was the bank that sent me the email.
It's another division of the bank.
Yeah, another division of the bank. So it was a ruthless time for business.
Yeah, it was particularly difficult. So at this point, I'm just looking at myself. I'm just, what am I going to do now? I've got a baby there. I've got, the wife is on maternity. What am I going to do?
So what was your was this still whilst you was working at the bank?
No, I'd left the bank.
Okay, so was you self-employed? Or what
I was self-employed at this point, right. And I had enough proof to say this could work because I'd earned a bit of money, so I was sort of scaling up.
So we've missed a big part of this story here. I'd love to roll back on. Yeah. So during so to fill out this picture. So you was working with the bank till 2007?
Yes,
so
I left
just before the credit crunch.
Yeah, early on, it was kind of around, I left around February. Yeah. Although, you see, in hindsight, I probably should have, I couldn't have known. No. But at that time, at the bank, where we used to sort of lend, I used to lend sort of approve, I didn't really approve the loans, but I would actually process the loan and get them approved by the managers, as it were. Yeah. So I was sort of processing loans that were successful, sort of 15 to 25 loans per day kind of thing. Yeah. That's just me, yeah? And that's a lot of people.
And and so at that point in 2007, you then took your first step and for the first time became self-employed.
Yes. So I'll take you back a little bit. Why I'm mentioning this number of loans that we're approving per day. So then there's other people in the branch. There's like 6 of us, 7 of us in the branch. So we're all sort of approving loans of that sort of number for each one of us, the people in the branch. This is 2006, sort of, we started to feel that the numbers were thinning out. They're thinning out really bad. And it's such that we were only approving like 15 loans a week. This is how bad things really got. But at that point, nothing was actually bad. Nothing was going on. But somewhere within the subprime market, which was our number one sort of source of capital at that point, somewhere within the subprime market, something was happening. Yeah. Even the people, there was a lot of defaults. A lot of people were not actually taking loans anymore. And then a lot of people had sort of taken up way too much credit. Yeah. So there was every sign that something's happening. Like if you remember that story about, if you saw the pictures of the tsunami in Indonesia many years ago, that the people at the beach could see the water going back. It kept on going back, and they didn't know that this was actually a significant sign. No. But for us, something was happening in the if you like in the finance world where something was happening with loans. We didn't know. No. So by the time I'm going
somebody somewhere knew.
Someone somewhere knew. But there were now looking back, there was every sign that this thing's about to blow up. Yeah. This thing's about to, really to be blown up to smithereens. It was, now it's very obvious this is what was going to happen. Yeah. So at this point, I'm leaving it because I'm thinking, this job, we're not really making any money. I'm not making target. I'm not making bonus anymore. I'm back to the basic income. I should go into self-employment. Yeah. So I spoke with a guy who was a mortgage broker back in London, and he'd given me a job. So I was actually doing sort of small-time mortgage. They used to call them introducers, but I was building up to become a mortgage broker.
So as in the industry, it's called an IAR, authorised representative.
Something like that. Yes, but I was working under him. I didn't have my authorization, but I was working towards my authorization. So essentially, I was still doing a sales job. Yeah. So I was getting commission from this guy, good money from the guy. He'd given me I call him a guy because it was a small company. And so I thought, I can scale this thing up. I got to Northampton. I go join this group of developers and mortgage brokers, and I did my CMAP, and I'm. Yes, I'm geared up for big things, and
so your life's looking good.
Yes,
at that point,
and there's a baby coming.
2007, 2008.
Yes.
You're married, settled, living in Northampton. You've just had your first child, just been born.
Yes.
And then you get a phone call.
Yes, and that's just it just chopped me at my knees. Like I was just floored. What am I going to do? So I had a bit of residual money, so we could keep ourselves going for a while. And then all of the work that I was used to, so those days, even sales company, I'm like starting to look for jobs and all that. I can't get jobs. And I think I was actually at home for a good year.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get jobs. I thought, if I can't, there's no mortgages, let me just go do some kind of sales job, some kind of call center job or something. Nothing was happening. It was so bad. And then eventually things started to soften up a little bit around 2010. I would say thereabout. So 2009 was completely dead for me. And I'm just hanging around the house. I'm looking after the baby, and the missus has gone back to work now. Yeah. It was strange.
And it must have been. You just said it was strange, but it must have also been a huge strain.
It was a massive strain. But at that time, I started doing these other things as well. I'm starting to think, okay, so if I can't do this, let me go on to. I think at that point there was something of a revolution on eBay. Where you could start sell things on eBay from sort of just the things around your house, but you could sort of do drop shipping. So start doing a bit of this drop shipping, not the way they do it now, but back then, you really could sell things. And I started to make some money. So I wasn't just loafing around the house. So I was making some money. And then I was learning a bit more about e-commerce at this time. And then I started to sell quite a lot of stuff on eBay, things that I used to get from other people, like TVs and sort of secondhand goods. And then when things started to open up for me, I thought, I just need to get a job. I need to go back to work. So I did a stint in recruitment not too far from here in Milton Keynes, nursing recruitment. And I was only there for a very short space of time, and I was very successful with it in that very short space of time. But I'd done another stint in London. And my boss in London, that job, he said, I want you to come back because we're very good at your job. And that's once again back in the world of me communicating and selling. So he'd given me a job, only a 1 month contract to they were an events company / advertising / magazine. Small, tiny company with only 3 people in the office. And he was very impressed with how I did. And he says, he expected that I would probably make for him about 10 grand to get him out of a hole. But I made him roughly around 30-something thousand pounds within that month. Because I was hungry, This was my first time back in work, and I'm thinking I need to make the most of this, and so I was very good at that. And then I went back to recruitment, which I did very well as well. And then he calls me, he says, I've got a job for you. You'll have international travel, all this and all that. And I just love the idea of flying to America, on company tab to do business. It gave me the sense of being back in the big time, if you like. Yeah. So I went back, and I was very successful with that. By the time I left, there was 15 people in the office now, and the company was really growing big. It was a business that was, if you like to call it, trade press for sustainability. All this stuff that's now it's kind of mainstream.
So why did you leave? You've just described that you hopped between a couple of jobs.
Yes.
So you started doing eBay business. A lot of people do the eBay business and do it very well, but I'm interpreting from what you're saying that it brought a bit of money in, but it wasn't enough.
It wasn't consistent.
No.
Yes.
So you took a job, recruitment, selling,
advertising,
yes,
and
went back to recruitment, then went back to that job. Did that?
Yes, that's actually how it happened. Yes.
Yeah. And then things were building up. You're traveling internationally.
I was loving it. I was enjoying it. Yes.
So you're describing that you've gone back into the world of work.
Yes, the corporate world.
As a corporate or getting a wage. I've got 2 questions really. So how did that change the dynamic at home? Because you've gone from your wife's gone and been the breadwinner. You're back out at work. So how's how's home changing?
Yes.
And then moving on to, why did that role that was fantastic in trade come to an end? Yeah,
so things obviously get better. The missus didn't need to sort of work nearly as hard. There was, so I was able to stabilize things back at home again, and things were, we had our second child 2010 thereabout. 2011 he was born. Sorry. I forget something.
We're editing that bit out.
Yeah, so things at home, were better because obviously it's just better when there's more money and you're keeping up with your payments, you're keeping up with everything, so everything's just more stable. And I'm in this job. I loved the job, but at some point, weird politics just happens in some of these corporations, and then you think I used to believe in job security, that there's such a thing as you should always try and achieve job security, until I realized, if you don't own the company, they get rid of you when they feel like it, kind of thing. It doesn't matter how good you are. If some element comes into the company and they're just not happy about this or about that, they want a different direction, they will do whatever they want with you. And that's something I struggled with, because I thought I deserved a bit more loyalty, as it were. But I can't really get into it, as it were. But at the same time, I've started to really ache within myself that I really should go back to the entrepreneurial sort of route, because it's just. And to be honest with you, I think we talked about this at the event, that at that point I would tell you honestly that my mental health was really suffering, because I didn't understand why one day I'm sort of doing very well, I'm doing everything the company wants me to do, and then they're starting to try and adjust the commission structure down, such that they pay me less, and I start to get things like, I can't pay you this month, I'll pay you next month. And not because the company had no money, but there was sort of strange behaviors which were not necessary. And there was other elements which to my mind at that time felt like favoritism.
Right.
And there were so many things I just couldn't understand. I thought, because I think if I'm straight and loyal with you, I expect the same from you, kind of thing. Yeah. So, and then one of my friends explained to me that, look, your boss really owes you nothing. Really, he doesn't. The day he doesn't need you, and you find someone else to do your job. That's just reality.
I find that surreal. Not everybody works that way, but I know that some people do.
Yeah.
It's right that a boss doesn't owe you anything in that sense. But in the same vein, if something's working, it's working well, and it's working well for the business, you don't break it.
Nothing is logical sometimes when you work for people. It's just they will do things how they feel sometimes. I've worked in many smaller companies, and personalities sort of, they trump logic. Yeah. It's very much about what's annoying them today or whatever. So, and I just, at this point, I was sort of in my late 30s, as it were. And I'm starting to have this sense that, this kind of being treated like a child is starting to hurt a little bit. Okay. It's not, in my 20s, you could sort of push me around a little bit if you could, for the purposes of, trying to motivate me or whatever. But I just couldn't take it anymore.
So how's that affecting you? You said it's affecting your mental health. So how is that affecting you outside of work?
It was very difficult, because I did try to communicate with the wife at the time that this stuff is really hard for me. What's going on, and I wasn't really raised to sort of cry out and sort of show a lot of emotion and weakness. And I find sometimes also the people around you who sort of expect you to keep earning, to keep the ship afloat, as it were. When you are in a vulnerable condition like that, they don't always sort of, how do I explain? They also worry about their own sort of position being threatened, as it were. They start to worry about themselves being hungry because you're not, earning, or you're not functioning correctly, kind of thing. So it starts to, in some people anyway, it creates some sort of self-serving sort of survival mechanism. So they start to think about themselves more than they think about your condition. That's how I felt. So, and then I went into another role after that, which I actually got headhunted to come and start a recruitment firm.
Start a recruitment
yes,
firm? Okay.
From scratch. And at this point, I'd left the job in London. I'd been doing a bit of temping here and there in London still, but I wasn't commuting. I didn't want to commute to London anymore. I just had an evolution. I just changed. I just didn't want to do this anymore. And with everything that was going on, I just felt like, I've always felt like, if you've got capabilities, you can sort of use your skills somewhere else. You can create more opportunities with your skills. So I got headhunted, and then it was a group of people who had created a recruitment firm out of crowd-funded recruitment firm. So yeah, they just came together. They put together a bit of money. They said, we want to start a recruitment firm, and so they hired me as a director, operations director. So I went into that one. I was there for 2 years. It started as a project, like a project management sort of thing, that at the end of the project you come off. And at some point they really wanted me to be there long term, but it had a lot more complexity in terms of the partnership mechanism with crowdfunding. Yeah. Everyone has got something to say.
Everybody's got a slice of the pie.
Yes, everybody's got a slice of the pie, and it becomes extremely unwieldy and unmanageable. And not everyone who was in this sort of in the whole scheme had any sense of what it takes to run a business, or the sort of milestones, the sort of challenges you meet and how you overcome them, and where there's the horizon, the long-term horizon of when do we achieve this, when do we do this. So I set everything up, and after that I started to see that this is not, I can't keep on doing this, because there was way too much things, nothing to do with work. Okay. A lot more to do with just the characters, the human beings involved.
People management.
Both
up and down.
Yes. So, I think one of the most unpredictable things to work with are human beings. And the more you have, the more complexity and unpredictability you have. And, you either sort of, I don't even know how people who sort of deal with a lot of people with a lot of say, I don't know how they do that, like football managers and people like that. I don't know how they do it, because it's just all pressure. It's just noise. I don't even know how they tune out that noise and sort of focus on the goal to achieve what they're trying to achieve. So at that point, I had also gone back. I traveled back to Zimbabwe, which is kind of where the most recent episode. I traveled back to see my mom, and there was sort of talk within the media about there was a lot of new opportunities coming to the country, because there was a change of government. That's when the old president left power. Yeah. So being an African, I thought, let me go back home. Let me see if I can help to develop my own country. Yeah. Let me just see. And I wanted an inspiration at this point.
Did you take your family back with you?
No, I didn't. I just went on a fact-finding mission.
Right.
And our thought processes were together with the wife. We thought, maybe to some extent, maybe we could start to rebuild ourselves back into the country, and I don't know, raise our children back here or whatever. There was a lot of that within the air. So I went across there to do a fact-finding mission. I just wanted to see what's a business environment like, because I'd always ever gone back as a returning sort of going back to live with family, see mom, see dad before he passed on. And so this time I went there as a businessman. Yeah. I went there to prospect, to see. So I learned about everything, about the mining sector, the farming sector, a lot of the goods that we've got here in the UK. Food, a lot of food comes from Zimbabwe, believe it or not. Avocados and stuff like that. But one of the things that I discovered was that this country lacks mechanization. It lacks machinery. If it lacks anything else, the one thing it lacks the most is just mechanization. Infrastructure is reasonable. It's not fantastic, but it's reasonable. Yeah. But there's not enough machines to do a lot of things, to create things. So a lot of things are imported. Okay. Things that shouldn't be imported, things that people could make in the country. So I started to go on this journey of trying to find out, what kind of machinery would I even start with? And in some of the conversations I had, someone mentioned something about something innocuous. It says, I need to go to South Africa to buy ear tags for my cattle. And I said to him, why do you have to go to South Africa to buy ear tags? He had a herd of cattle, but he couldn't keep up with the numbers and all of that sort of stuff. He just wanted to get a bit more on the commercial side of it. So I said, why do you have to go to South Africa to buy ear tags? Those are just plastic things that you just stick to the ear of the cow. He says, because no one does them here in Zim. He says, are you sure? He says, yeah, there's no company that does that. There's no such thing here in Zimbabwe. So then I started searching up, and then I discovered that. I said, so how do they actually make them? What is this stuff? And then I discovered those things are made of plastic, which can be put in a mold, and you just heated plastic, put it in a mold, it comes out, and that's an ear tag. And then I discovered that the way you write on the ear tag, I said, is that actually ink? Is that how do they write on the ear tag the name of the farm or the number of that cow or whatever information you put on the ear tag? And said, I don't know how they do that. So I started, at this point, my mind is starting to go into sort of overdrive now. I'm deep in this. What is going on? How do I do this? And then I discovered that there's something called a laser machine. Okay, so the laser machine is the one that sort of scans across, and then it engraves, and it creates that number on the plastic. And then I start looking, and I'm going to Alibaba. I came back from Zimbabwe after I'd been there for like a month, and I'm on Alibaba, and I'm talking to people in China, And then I'm watching videos upon videos upon videos. I wasn't watching anything else on TV other than laser cutting, laser engraving machinery. And then I'm learning about this stuff. I literally was radicalizing myself in this stuff. So, and then suddenly I know a lot about laser machines. And then I thought, okay, so there's that laser machine that does all of that. And there's another one that actually cuts wood and it then engraves and all of this stuff. And I start to really think to myself, okay, so I could get a laser machine and take it back to Zimbabwe and start fabricating things or furniture or tools, or I really could do this. But it wasn't. As time went on, we had like elections in Zimbabwe, and there was a lot of political upheaval. Things started to get a bit weird. So the missus at home was like, I'm not really sure that we want to go now because some people died during the election and things like that. And so I went to China to learn more about these laser machines. So I see the machine in work at work and actually play around with it, actually learn on it. And so I bought the machine.
Just to understand at this time, so your travel to Zimbabwe, your research time spent there, you travelled to China, and then buying the machine. Was this during a time where you was out of work?
I was in recruitment at that time.
You was in recruitment?
In the recruitment, in the firm that I'd been doing recruitment with towards the end. So I was setting myself up to say, I told these people that, I'm going to leave you. Yeah. And I'm going to leave you at this point, sort of end of August. Yeah. So in the lead up to that, that's when I between January, February, March, April, May, that's when I'd been to China, done my research, been to China, bought the machinery, such that the machinery showed up in September time. Okay,
so you had a salary coming in during this period of time.
And I had some money saved up. Okay. I was making enough money to keep a good chunk of it, to keep going. Okay. So I had believed in myself that, let me give myself 6 months. I've got a 6 months run out. I've got some money, for 6 months. And that just ran out really quick.
If you think you need 6 months, save up 12.
I think that's how you do it, So I get the machine. So the machine comes to my house, and I put it in my shed, and I haven't got a clue what to do with this thing. Like it's yay big,
I've seen one. My wife
used
one. She did some sort of making gift boxes.
Yes.
And she had a laser cutter that would cut out within plastics and would supply custom-made gift boxes.
Yes.
So I've
so
seen
you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I had a thing there. So I discovered, okay, I've seen all of these videos on YouTube on what you can make, and it's like there's no end to the number of products that you can make with the machine, and that became a confusing point for me as well. There was just too much to the market. Where do I even start? What products do I even start making? So I put myself into this state. I needed to learn. Yeah. And I'd never actually seen the machine at work other than when I went to China and then the videos. Then I discovered I actually need to learn. So the machine is not, put it this way, the machine itself is not a business. No. It's like a piece of land. Yeah. It's like a farm. Yeah? This here, where we are here, is a piece of land. Someone could have used this as a racetrack. Yeah. They could have used this to plant rapeseed oil, whatever. They could have used this for anything else, so they used it for these buildings, right? So the machine itself, what you program into it is what it produces for you. It doesn't think for you.
You had a crash course in CAD.
Yes. So at this point, I've never actually designed anything at all. I have no idea. And I'm talking to one of my friends who's a really sort of tech guru, and he's saying, "Oh, you need to learn Photoshop." I don't even know. I've heard of Photoshop, but I have no idea how do you do. And then I start playing around, and then I'm like, okay. And so I used to buy the designs with the money that I had to play around, to plug them into the machine to produce some products. And then I realized I can't actually afford to buy designs from people. These designs are too expensive. And a lot of the things I was doing was experimental at this point. So I can't keep paying someone.
I'm having a flashback here. So I'm trying to picture this scenario because I'm trying to, I had an experience with my wife before we were married. Were we married? Yeah, we were married at the time. And when I started, my very first proper business was in web design.
Yes.
And I got my first order from somebody who said, right, we need to build a website for me. This is how we want it. I had no idea how to do it. Okay. So I'm sat in our spare bedroom. We had a little 2-bedroom house in Luton.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sitting there 1999.
All right.
And I've got a book open, which I bought off Amazon. I'm looking through and I'm copying onto the computer how to
build a website.
Build this website. She walks in with a cup of tea. She said, "What are you doing?" So I'm just learning how to do this. She said, "You started a web design company and you don't even know how to design bloody websites." She threw the tea down and stormed out because quite literally I'd left a paid job and started from that. Listening to you talk here sounds like a very similar situation in that you'd gone to Zimbabwe, done this research, then gone to China. Now, I've been to China a couple of times for work. It's not cheap. Bought a
big old machine,
bought a laser cutter, CNC.
Yes, that's what's
brought that back. Not brought. Got it shipped over to the UK. You've got this great big machine. You're finding out that actually I don't even know how to do this, and you're gonna have to buy these things. How did your wife respond to that?
Well, she had an initial level of excitement about it. Like there was something. She said, "I know you work it out. I know you figure it out."
Yeah.
But the longer it went before I knew what I was doing, the more frustrated she got.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
And then I started running out of money and all of this. And then I made a whole bunch of products that I was going to sell in Zim. And I went over there to try and sort of recoup some of my money. And those products were just not, really and truly, they were just not good enough. So I didn't make any money out of that trip. It was complete loss-making trip. And so she was not happy with that at all. Yeah. And then I came back and I got a bit of sort of piecework here and there kind of thing to just get a bit of money coming in. And I was doing a bit of couriering with my car to just make sure I've got money coming in. But meanwhile, I was spending a lot of my time just learning. And so before I knew it, I became pretty good at, I don't actually use Photoshop. I use the other one called CorelDRAW. I'd never actually seen that stuff before, but I had to sit there and spend a lot of time in my shed, in my spare time, creating products and rendering them on the machine. And then I started selling them. I started selling more and more at events and more at online, and I started making money.
What sort of products are we talking here now?
So I was making some things for the Zimbabwe market, which were like clocks and plaques with sort of poetry written on them, things that Zimbabwean people understand. And then I started making earrings out of the thinner materials, and then I was making other things out of acrylic.
So this was all being shipped to Zimbabwe?
No. At this point, I realized the whole Zimbabwe connection is.
So
I'm
Zimbabwe is within the UK.
Yeah.
Okay.
Within the UK, and then I was shipping them as far as Australia and America and places like that. And then I started doing Etsy, and I was making lampshades and stuff like that, and that was selling very well. And so there was a massive shift in fortunes for me when it came to that. But I still was, and I think the problem was always I wasn't sort of quite making enough money to live off of that. Right. So I had to keep a job, keep doing this part-time stuff. And somewhere along the way, I would have some good months. And I think that these were some of the biggest knocks for me. I have some, like a good run, a good number of months, things are really working. And then I'm just struggling. I'm not making a lot of money again. So it's the stop-start nature of it, where as determined as I am, it sort of kind of almost eats away at your spirit.
It's a very famine and feast when you're running your own business.
Yes. So that's that to me. If you ask me what one of the hardest things I've found about running a business is controlling your emotions when you're in feast and famine sort of type of scenario, because when no orders come in. And when you're trying to sell all of this stuff and nothing's happening, it is depressing as hell. Yeah. And then you wake up and you've got a whole lot of orders to fulfill, and suddenly, you know what? I'm a champion. Suddenly I feel like, give me anything and I'll win.
But with going through that famine and feast, and then if you just described your every spare moment you've got, you're in your shed and you're fulfilling orders, and then over and above that, you're then doing delivery, courier type work as well. So you're effectively holding down two jobs. You're trying to get your own business off the ground, but you're also doing another job to cover the bills.
Yes.
What strain did that put on your home life?
We were together for 17 years, and there were a lot of things that had developed over time, problems. And, anyone who's been married to anyone for a long time, there are certain problems that have been going on for a long time. But they kind of got worse as a result of this whole thing. At some point, we just ended up on two completely different paths. And she just thought I should just go and get a job in an office somewhere. And I was like, I just don't have it in me. I couldn't explain it. And I think for most people who listen, apart from people in this game of entrepreneurship, no one else gets it. But at some point, we just ended up completely estranged from each other because we couldn't find a middle ground. And we had to go our separate ways, as it were. Which, it was regrettable at the time, but I don't look back at it as... I miss my children, no lie about that. I miss seeing them every morning, but we ended up where we ended up, kind of thing. And it would have been a contributing factor. Yeah. So it wouldn't have been the only thing, but it would have been a contributing factor.
It's a very difficult thing. I'm sat here talking to you now. Yesterday was my 24th wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
With the lady who threw the cup of tea down and said, "You don't even know how to do this, and this is what you've done." And it is. I can speak from experience. When you are trying to get something off the ground, or when you're in the very early stage of businesses, it is, as you've described yourself, so all-consuming. Yes. That it is intensely difficult to maintain other relationships.
Yes.
I've spoken to other guests on this podcast who've spoken about friendships breaking down, relationships with family drifting apart, because you're trying so desperately to create something, and you can see further ahead what you're trying to build and what you're trying to aspire towards. And there, the justification in yourself is that it will be better when I get there.
Yes.
The opposite side, something I've learned from my wife as well, is that at what cost? And it's that sort of aspect. Now I've complimented my wife on this podcast before, and I'll compliment her again. You have to earn these brand points when you can. You do. But she's very good at sort of pulling back in, and I'm lucky now to build the business to a stage where it's not so all-consuming all the time for me. There are times, it's like the famine and feast we mentioned earlier. But it is, for anybody listening to this, it is difficult to try and walk that line, because the line's not visible, is it?
No.
There isn't. You can't turn around and think, right, okay, I'm taking a bit extra sacrifice here, or I'm giving back there. There is just nothing until you're so far away from that line that the warning signs are they're not even there. Literally, you're in the consequence before you've even seen the warning.
Yes, that's very true.
It's a difficult period.
It is a difficult period. And you see, the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur, amongst other things, is no one gets you.
No.
It doesn't matter how you try to simplify to people your way of thinking or what you see. Apart from other people who are actually doing exactly the same thing as you, no one else gets you. I mean, it's almost like watching those people doing, Tour de France cycling. And you're like, why are you going up a mountain, on an empty stomach, on just water, and you're at the very back? What are you doing? Do you have to do this? Go and get a job. Go work at Tesco's. You will just be better off. You won't be in so much pain. But you can't explain the drive to some extent. To come back to the name of this one. I don't know. I don't know that and that's where the foolhardy side of it comes out of it. They sort of our entrepreneurs are often looked upon as sort of self-destructive to some extent, but I don't know how to be someone else. No. And this has always been me. I don't know how, and I try, but.
I see. I've seen some of your art. I'll call it art because it is art, and they are really, just really impressive.
Thank you.
So, doing what you do now. How does that make you feel? And And why do you do it?
You know, I feel very positive and good within myself. You know, that's despite everything that you could point to that, you know, can be called losses. I feel very comfortable with myself. Yeah. And I feel like, you know, when I found myself in that state, and I'm on Coral Draw and I'm drawing stuff and I'm actually designing things that I'm actually making. I mean, it's like I found a new me. Like it's like this is who I was when I was 10 years old. And and when someone doesn't get that, you know, be it a friend or partner, or whatever, I can't help them, because it's a rebirth, if you want to call it that. And it's just I can't explain, you know, that this is really me finding out. And I suppose I'm in my 40s now, and I think a lot of this stuff happens when you're in your 40s, as it were, because you know you focus on everything else that sort of fits the mold, and that sort of you know, path of least resistance, as it were. But you really, deep down inside, you're not really yourself. You're kind of dying. And that's kind of how I felt for a very long time. And I feel alive. You know, I'm 46 now. And I feel like I feel like I'm 16 years old again, you know, despite everything else you pointed at. Oh, are you sure? You know, but
when we talk about your younger years and your first step at running your own business, it was very clear then that the money was the motivation, the better life.
Yes.
I could be completely off the wall here, so correct me if I am, but I'm seeing a picture of somebody who's travelled from Zimbabwe to the UK to create a better life.
Yes.
The measure of that better life is often money, as in you can have a bigger house, better car, better. So you're driving towards that all the way, and then as you've gone on and when things haven't gone well, you've picked up another career, a job where you get to earn those money, but you've been sort of aiming towards that. You've gone seeking opportunities back in Zimbabwe. You've gone over to China, and it's constant striving from that with a very stoic work ethic. What's your driver and motivation now?
You know, I was thinking about that as I was coming here. So it's not really money.
No.
I definitely want to be rich. You know, I no longer have my BMW that I had before that. I really late. And I still look at a lot of the trappings, but it's not really what drives me. Yeah. And I don't think even back then it was always the thing that drove me. I think the thing that really drives me is this creative process. This process of creating something from nothing and solving problems and looking at something that's completely abstract, because my thinking process at all times is always abstract. Looking at the abstract and creating something out of something that just makes no sense to anyone else, but here we are, kind of thing. It's a lot more of the drive. And I always feel like, you know, when you solve problems, you know, that's when the money comes in. Or when you create something and you invent something, that's when the money comes in. I've also, maybe I'm wrong, but I often think that it's only then can you actually become someone who is making money from your business, because you've solved a problem or you've created a new product, and that sort of drives me more than the goal of making $1 million by the end of next year, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It does. Listening to you, I see a sort of a change. Because of sort of the early years, as I described earlier, like taking your first business, you was earning less in the bank, so you then went self-employed because you could earn more money.
Yes.
And I can see that's a very clear measure, clear definition, and you just had a young family starting. So the motivation there comes across to me as getting a better life.
Yes.
And the world we live in, a better life is being able to buy the things that create a better life.
Yes.
What you do now in your business is very creative, and by being very creative in what it is itself, it's a very emotional thing. It's very emotive. So I'm seeing a different person now in your mid-40s to somebody who in their sort of late 20s with a young family. It's a very big switch, which isn't unusual when speaking to people who...
Is it not?
No. people's motivations who have on a sort of an entrepreneurial journey change over time from what drives them. Myself, starting a young family, the measure was need to get a better, need to get money, need to get a better home for my children. I want my children to have a stable home. Things that I never had in my younger years. Now, speaking about the business, I actually get more joy about seeing other people's achievements and other people's progression and that stuff, that level. I'm kind of content now. I'm all right. That's where I'm likening to listening to yourself.
Yeah, and that's very much how I feel. And I think even as I have been growing up and maturing to who I am now, I've always had an influential sort of element in other people's lives. I've always been. I'm the oldest brother amongst out of 7 children. So even as a younger person, my brothers come to me to ask for advice. So if I was your friend, I probably would spend a lot of time me giving you some sort of advice based on my thoughts or my experience. So a lot of the people that have come in contact with me, friends, family, an element of their life has changed because I influenced them, kind of thing. So I feel like that comes naturally with me. And so the things that I sell there's an element of me trying to influence people. It's art, like you said, I'm trying to influence people to say, look at this beautiful thing, don't you love it? That's, and it's coming out of, I don't know, somewhere within my psyche, creative psyche, like, let me make something beautiful. Let me make something nice. Let me make something, that you put in your house, and it's actually something that you look at and wow, that's actually wonderful. And so when I get the comments on Etsy and people looking at it and they love the product, it kind of fulfills for me something.
So what's your aspirations for your business going forward?
I want it to be more of a business than something that only reflects my character. I want it to be one that doesn't need to be propped up by sort of constantly looking for outside funding. I want it to be more self-sustaining, to just get bigger, such that the creative process is not, if you like, is not sort of hindered or interfered with by the need for bread and butter. Okay. Because that's a fight. The bread and butter, you sit in the lab or you sit in the studio and you're creating something, but you have to think, how much money have I made? Yeah. Is this making me money? Should I stop? Should I go and find more money? And so that sort of cycle of sort of not necessarily. It sometimes feels like I'm spinning my wheels in one place, because like you said, it's feast and famine. So you make a lot and then you make nothing. So have you on average, have you made a lot? Kind of thing. Right. So that's just. So there's a lot more steps I need to take and a lot more relationships I need to build to sort of achieve escape velocity, as they call it. That's what I'm trying to achieve at the moment. Yeah.
And you've got a fair amount of life experience that feeds into your sort of business journey with the two main sort of experiences you've had there from polar opposites, really, and the impact it's had to you personally. Putting that all together, if you mentioned about sort of influence or helping young people coming to you for advice, so you're sat in front of a young aspiring high energy David in front of you. What advice would you give your younger self?
I would say to learn patience. I would say to learn that you can't speed up the process of learning. And you don't stop learning. No. And I don't know, maybe I might be wrong, but I would say don't focus on the money. Focus on your skills, and then the money will come. That's what I think. And I even see my business at the moment, one of my sort of thought processes is leaning very much towards training. I want to train people how to use laser machinery. And I would like to do that for younger people who are sort of in the creative space, such that the older they get, by the time they're looking for work and they're looking to, they're already capable of using CNC machines. That's kind of what's in my process in my mind at the moment, so we'll see how that comes along.
No, I wish you very good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming and having a chat with myself here, David. It's been really great listening to you. Really interesting story with so many lessons for people to take away from here. I wish you every success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. You know, it's my first moment in light. So I really have enjoyed this, and keep doing what you do, you know, and I keep listening to the podcast every time. So I love it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. Please remember to hit follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. It really helps the algorithm and push this podcast up through the rankings. And also leave some feedback. I look forward to bringing you the next episode of Drive. Until next time, this is Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF.